Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Soul Seekers podcast, where we believe that hunting has the power to transform lives through primal adventure, as we share our mission of mentorship is conservation. To learn more about everything we do, check out our show on Carbon TV or go to soulseekersnation.com. Freedom on, everybody, and stay soulful. Do you want to become a better shooter, reduce flinch, protect your ears, and just overall enjoy shooting your gun that much more? Then there's no better way to do that than by adding a suppressor to the end of your barrel. Be sure to check out Huxwrx Safety Co, as they are a leader in the suppressor world with their OSS Flow-Through Technology, virtually eliminating blowback and toxic gas that can affect weapon system performance and shooter health. To find out more about Huxwrx, go to huxwrx.com. That's huxwrx.com, and go get yourself a suppressor for your upcoming hunts. This podcast is also proudly brought to you by OnX Hunt. When I first got into hunting, I kept hearing all about public land and different access and how to find different locations to hunt. I was like, well, how are people even identifying all this stuff? Well, sure enough, I came across the number one hunting GPS app, and that is OnX Hunt. If you guys want to get better at hunting and go deeper into your scouting, OnX Hunt is the number one GPS app for that. Join the millions of hunters who trust OnX Hunt to find more game, discover new access, and hunt smarter. It was a game changer for me, and I know it's going to be a game changer for you if you've never used it. If you have used it, you know the power that it holds. Guys, I really hope you enjoy this episode. If you want to know more about OnX, go to onxmaps.com/hunt. And check out their app. Be blessed, freedom on, and stay soulful. If you're in the market for optics, I want you to go check out blackdiamondoptics.com. Black Diamond Optics offers world-class sporting and tactical optics, including thermals, all at wholesale pricing, direct to consumer. They are going to be partnering up with us for 2023, and I want to start pointing you over towards their direction. Check out Black Diamond Optics. If you've got any questions about it, shoot us a message. Love to hear from you. Be blessed, everybody. All right, guys, if you're looking for a better way to stay hydrated this coming hunting season and on all your adventures in the future, go check out hardsidehydration.com. Their swig rig is awesome, an absolute game changer when it comes to staying hydrated. I get tired of playing around with any water bladders in my bag and having to remove things to get to them and the chance of them puncturing and all that. So what Hardside did, take Nalgene's, got multiple sizes, and you're attaching your hose straight to that. Keep it on the outside of your pack, a lot easier to use. They also have a lot of other cool things. Go check out hardsidehydration.com. Use the code SOULSEEKERS10. That's all one word. Save yourself 10% at checkout. Hope you guys enjoy this podcast. Be blessed. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Soul Seekers podcast. I'm your host, Johnny Mack, and today I am joined by a bow hunting warrior in the woods. His name is Stephen Miller. He's the host of the Bow Hunting AZ podcast and is an awesome human being and has a love for hunting in the outdoors and teaching others. As I've researched some of his content that he's put out and the things that he stands for, just the intrigue grew more and more, and I was like, I got to know more about this guy. So without further ado, we got Stephen Miller on the podcast. We're going to be covering all sorts of different topics, but specifically misconceptions about hunting, because Stephen has quite a perspective when it comes to the hunting world. A lot of us, we only speak out of opinion, like, oh, well, I heard this happen one time, or I heard other people talk about it, and we form opinions. But very few people have perspectives, and perspectives come with experiences. And so when we can have experiences, whether positive or negative experiences, they develop perspectives, and it actually gives us more of a leg to stand on when having conversation. And so with this being the podcast that is all about transforming lives through primal adventure and mentorship is conservation, it's very important that we understand that experiences are the anchor or if the foundation of how we go about telling our stories and our journey, because it all matters. So without further ado, Stephen, what's up, brother?
What's going on, man? Dude, I appreciate you having me. Thank you so much. I'm honored.
Dude, it is a blast. I tell you, you've been podcasting for how long?
Boy, I want to say I started around like 2018 or probably maybe 2019 at the latest, but it's been a few years.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it just opens up so many different doors, and the
it does.
networking that you can do through podcasting, you know, there's people on this Instagram live, which is like, okay, awesome. People are here. They're listening. But at the end of the day, doing a podcast is like, okay, what information do I want to gather myself? Sometimes it's, what information do I have to share with other people? But I look for the experts in their field. And a lot of the times, humans like to live a humble life or even a life that they wouldn't vote for themselves. But I'm going to tell you that I view you as an expert in the field, and seeing your different experiences. I want to hear about them. So, give a little background for everyone that's joining us on this live and hearing this podcast for the first time. A little bit about yourself and what you do in the media space and within hunting.
Sure. Yeah. I started. Boy, trying to think where to take it back to. I started in 2013 just as a hobby photographer, and kind of turned into a media business. My main gig pretty much is real estate photography. That's where I cut my teeth on everything. I started off doing weddings and portraits first, and then jumped into real estate photography. Built a media business, and kind of fast forward a few years of just working through that and taking that full time. I saw like a Cam Haynes video pop up, and I was like, oh man, I had shot bow as a kid, and after church youth program, and was just wanting to get back into it after I saw that Cam Haynes video. Just fired me up,
Yeah.
and so I told the wife, I was like, well, I'm going to buy a bow and start hunting again. And that was when Instagram and social media was just kind of really exploding. A lot of organic growth on Instagram through photos and telling your journey and stuff. And so I was like, well, maybe I could take some pictures and just share what I'm learning as I hunt, and my failures. And, I wasn't an expert by any means. I didn't have a dad that took me out hunting every year, or anybody really that took me out. I had to learn it all on my own. So I just wanted to share my journey, my failures, my successes, stuff like that. And it just kind of grew into a local community thing
Yeah.
through the podcast, through Instagram and stuff like that. And it was just kind of cool to see a bunch of bow hunters come together, and hunters too. I still rifle hunt. I'm not high on myself thinking I'm better, doing a bow only. I'll take a rifle out any day. I'm happy doing that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I,
Yep. So it just turned into this podcast thing, man. And here we are.
I love it. What's so fascinating is Instagram was powerful
Yeah.
about what, 4 years ago?
Oh yeah.
And like you could get organic traction and just start building this community and
Yep.
connecting with people and all that. And now your feeds are filled up with more stuff that you don't follow than anything else. And it's like, oh,
Yeah.
just interesting. The algorithms, AI is taking over the world, and people don't
Oh
even
yeah.
realize it.
Yep. Yeah. The next 5 years is going to look very different from what it is now.
Right, right. I was recently on a business trip, and I met with Split Reed Marketing out of Colorado, the big waterfowl hunting guys.
Oh, nice. Yep.
And within that trip, we were talking about AI, and already AI generates photos, right? Where you can't really
Mhm.
tell a difference between whether it's a real photo or a fake. And
Yep.
the video side of it is just like 6 months away. Like
Yeah.
before you know it, we're going to be watching content that's not even real.
Yep. Yep.
Um, and so I think, and now I'm going to take the word think back. I know that's why it's so crucial that you and we tell our stories, why we
Yeah.
tell our perspectives, because in a world where we don't know what's real and what's not real, it's
Mhm.
imperative to have experiences and perspectives to speak to it rather than just being like, well, I saw this on the gram and.
Right. Right. Yes, exactly.
So when it comes to marketing, you were actually the one who connected me with Alan of the Lazy CK Ranch. So we did an episode
Yep.
back in, I believe, the month of June, talking
Mhm.
about the mentorship hunts that they run down here in Texas.
Yep.
What's your role within the hunting world and with the connection with Lazy CK?
Sure. Just through some of the stuff that I had done with bow hunting AZ, I had some people that were just kind of in the background, just watching me build this brand and stuff, and they liked what I did. And so um, I was uh, I was out at the Lazy CK Ranch, and Alan was sitting fireside with me and just said, "Hey, like I think our marketing needs more. I don't think we're doing good enough." He's like, "I see this brand that you built. What would you do if you were at the helm of the Lazy CK's marketing. And so just kind of threw a couple beers in a fireside chat. The next day I had a marketing contract drawn up, and now I've been their marketing director since 2020.
Man,
And yeah, it's been fun, dude. It's crazy. Like if you had asked me after high school what I wanted to do in life, I had no idea. I didn't know. I wasn't that kid that had a plan and was like, oh, I'm going to college and get my degree for this, blah blah. You know, throw a dart at the wall.
right.
But it was through, honestly, like I'm a big believer and I have very deep faith. I think the Lord put me exactly where I needed to be. And now as I look back in life and I just see door after door after door open for me, and having me placed exactly where I'm supposed to be, it's quite awesome to see it all come to fruition. But
Yeah,
yeah.
that's
Yep. So I
cool.
do the marketing for the CK basically now, and in conjunction with my media business that I still run.
That's awesome. I
Yeah.
am a believer that there are no coincidences in life.
Yeah. Yep.
Everything happens with purpose.
Absolutely.
Um, so so with that being said, doesn't always happen in the timing in which we want it to happen.
Yeah. That's true.
So, which ironically, in the hunting world, that is a lesson a lot of hunters have to learn very quickly,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yep.
Let's take it back, and before we dive into this world of misconceptions, what is your history within hunting in the outdoors?
Sure. So my first introduction to archery was a very nice gentleman, Ken Sloan. He owned a local archery shop here in Arizona. His wife was an Olympic archer, and he started a church youth program. Just had kids come shoot bows after church and stuff, and I took to it. He kind of took a liking to me, really took me under his wing, gave me my first bow that was his. He ended up passing away. I put the bow down for like all through high school and stuff, got into girls and friends and all that,
Hmm.
and then saw that Cam Hanes video, picked it up, wanted to get back into it, started shooting pretty religiously, and was like, all right, I'm going to go on my first hunt. It was a rifle hunt, and I got drawn for mule deer, and I shot my first mule deer like 3 days before I turned 30. Um,
Wow.
so that was pretty much my introduction to outdoors. I literally had to put my phone on a prickly pear cactus and FaceTime a buddy and have it point to me. I said, what do I do? Like, I've got this thing dead now. What do I do? And he's just dying laughing. He's like, all right, well, you're going to start here. You're going to work around, cut it up, do this. And so packed it out. He had me bring it to his house and then showed me how to break it down further after I had gutted it and skinned it a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, fast forward from 2018 to now. Yeah, I've been at it ever since, like avidly obsessed.
That's cool. So
Yeah.
going backtracking just a hair, what
Yep.
pricked your heart to start hunting?
Um, at the time, I was well, one, the Cam Hanes video for sure, but at the time, I would say I was really in the throes of cleaving from a corporate job that I had worked for 10 years. I was a drug compounding technician. I worked in a pharmacy, made drugs from scratch. I was like Breaking Bad. And I just was kind of really wanting to test my mettle personally in my own life, because I was about to jump ship from a pretty safe job and go fully employed with my media business that I had been building. And so at the time, I was like super into motivational stuff, like books, a lot of rah podcasts and business and everything. And I liked the notion that the outdoors gave me, that I could go out and get my butt handed to me, but then like wake up again and try to do it again the next day.
Mm,
And it was like every time I was being humbled, but at the same time I was learning something, and I was just hungry for that knowledge. So I saw a lot of comparisons in just my day to day life and hunting as well. And that still holds true in hunting. Like I love going out,
yeah.
being humbled, learning something new, never the master, always the student. So that's the big thing that draws me to
Man, that's awesome. So
it.
so you had on your very first hunt, you notched a tag. And
Yes. Yep.
and from that moment where you're like, whoa, this is something
That was
special.
hooked.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was just like a lot of people, it was just like a little spike, but I was immediately hooked, man. I came home, I processed it. My wife's mom's husband at the time helped me do it and stuff. And he broke it all down, had the grinder, the slicers, all that stuff. helped me do it, and it was just cool to sit down and sit there and eat it and be like, man, like I killed this, I brought it out. I was just hooked immediately.
Dude, absolutely. I'm stepping out of the picture for a second. This is my very first buck right here.
Oh heck
A
yeah.
little spike whitetail from the state of
Yep.
Washington. So I totally appreciate and respect how
Let's
that all goes down.
absolutely.
The the idea that like that challenge. Were you an athlete at all? Did you compete?
There's
Yes, there we go. I love
just a
it.
little dick. um Not really. I mean, I had played baseball growing up, I guess. I did some wrestling in high school. But I've always been super competitive. I like that. I like that testing myself. And then once it was more like kind of shifted away from competing against other people and competing against me, that's when I really, really got into it. I think that's what kind of lit the fire.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense. I love that. So from 2018 when you shot your very first deer, you've gone all over the place. You've gone to Africa. You've
Yep.
done the public land thing, and some of the topics that we're going to be getting into here pretty soon is talking about hunting Africa, but also hunting high fence hunts,
Yep.
um, which as soon as I got into the hunting space, I got opinions very fast about that, and I was like, hmm. And now, so a
Yep.
little background on me in case you didn't know. So I lived in the state of Washington. I killed my very first big game animal in 2017. So I was
Nice.
30
Nice.
years old when I took my hunter safety course, and
Okay.
just the call upon my soul, man. I was like, always wanted to be a hunter. And it wasn't until like 30 years old where I finally put my foot down and said, I'm going to choose myself for the very first time and stop doing things out of obligation for other people or expectations of others. I'm doing it because this is something I want to do. And
Yeah.
for the first time, and that's a part of the transformation through primal adventure that I talk about is for the very first time I chose myself, but through choosing myself, it impacts all the people around me in my community for better.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't realize this, but when you fly on an airplane and they say, okay, when we go through some turbulence or if anything happens, oxygen mask will fall from the ceiling. Make sure to put on your oxygen mask first before you help
Yep.
anyone else. So you can't give love if you're not willing to love yourself. For me, choosing to be a hunter was the one thing in my life where I said, I am going to feed my soul, and
Yeah.
I'm going to grow and challenge myself. And through that, this blessing has been able to extend to my wife, my children, my friends, all the different brand new hunters that we take afield. And that is how this mission of mentorship as conservation came about. With that being said, it's quite a perspective shift going from the Northwest where we have DNR, BLM, national forests, wilderness areas, to coming down here to the great state of Texas, and you have to have a public land permit to hunt public land, and it's crowded, or there's like really regulated times for the usage of it. And so
Yep.
ultimately, it's like get a lease or good luck hunting, or you're traveling a lot. And I'm like, oh man. So I'm wrapping my head around this. And even today, deer season opened Saturday.
Yep.
I was gone this week for 3 days, and so I was like, man, I was planning on hunting the opening, but I didn't because I wanted to spend time with my family. This morning, I had my target buck show up at my feeder for 2 hours in the daylight for the very first time.
Yep.
And the funness of cell cams really dissipated as the heartbreak of the cell cams came into play. And I was like, no, I'm eating breakfast, being like, it's at the feeder right now.
uh-huh.
Full picture. And I want to get into the misconceptions of hunting, but the point I'm making is it's so easy to be like, oh man, hunting over bait or over a feeder, that's cheating. That's not actually hunting. Oh, hunting a high fence ranch, that's not hunting. Africa hunting, what are you talking about? Why would you ever want to do that? You can't bring the meat back. All sorts of like different topics. So, um, as we go through this, let's start with your journey on the public land side of things, and then we'll progress through your different journeys and adventures. And I want you to talk
Yeah.
about what you learned through your experiences. What's up, Soul Seekers Nation? Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I really appreciate it. As a reward, I have some discount codes for you to use if you are in the market for a brand new hunting pack. Go check out initialascent.com and Initial Ascent packs. They are made in America. Their one-piece carbon frame is an absolute game changer. We run their packs. We love them. And you can save 5% at checkout by using the code SOULSEEKERS. That's all one word. Also, for those of you who are archery hunters and you are tired of shooting at dots on a target, check out deadnutsoutdoors.com for their lifelike 2D archery targets. You can save 20% on all of their products by using the code SOULSEEKERS at checkout. Once again, the code is SOULSEEKERS, all one word. Go check out initialascent.com and Dead Nuts Outdoors. Enjoy the podcast.
Sure, absolutely. The public land stuff, man, I'm super lucky that Arizona's like mostly public land. There's very little like large private ranches that you're not really able to hunt. If they are, it's like a cattle ranch, and usually they do kind of work and coincide with some hunters, specifically like a lot of mountain lion houndsmen and stuff like that. But pretty much you can throw a dart at the board or a map of Arizona and go hunt that unit. And a lot of the tags in Arizona are over the counter if you're a bow hunter. So it was pretty conducive to pick up a bow and just start hunting public land right away. And so that first deer that I shot, in 2018, this bull elk right here, I shot with my bow at public land hunt. Both these deer, that turkey, are all almost all except for this deer right here, pretty close to each other within, 50, 60 miles of each other.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was kind of my first introduction to it. And I had some preconceived notions too. I had heard of high fence hunting and stuff, and I was like, oh dude, that's stupid. That there's nothing right about that. Like I just, completely ignorant of what the experience was or how it worked or anything about that. Just shot some ideas of my own out there into the universe, and yeah, never thought I would be doing it. And so yeah, fast forward, a few years, and I had the opportunity to go out to Texas and give it a try. So it was pretty wild.
Was that at the Lazy CK that you?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
so that's how you ended up getting connected with them. Is
Yeah.
that you were like, out of all the places to go, I'll go check it out here.
Yep. Lazy CK was the first place I went to. They're at the time, I think they're about 7,000 acres. They ended up being 8,000, and then they kind of subleased another place for a little bit. Now they're back to 8,000 again.
Yeah.
So it's 8,000 acres. I mean, I'll throw the first idea out there to kind of try and I'm not trying to convince anybody or like what's the word, convert anybody onto high fence hunting, but just my approach to it now, as I've been there and done it myself, is like, okay, what is this all about? Well, 8,000 acres, I mean, that's the home range. That's larger than the home range of a deer. Like a deer, these deer up here aren't going to move that far in the wild, fence or not. Like,
Yeah.
it's just not going to happen. So they'll stay within that home range, and so there's one fact to kind of chew on a little bit. The other thing too is like I hear people knock feeders and stuff all the time or baiting, but it's like, man, let's think back a little bit. I have some Native American ancestry in me, and it's like, do you really think the Indians didn't put a pile of corn out to try and draw some deer in and maybe sit it? Like, is that really out of the realm of possibility? So were they wrong for doing that? Was that immoral of them to? No, come on. A lot of these animals, they have their own feed in the wild, even in a high fence. They don't need the feeders, but the only way you're ever going to see them is if you have an opportunity to sit over something that entices them to come out of their normal routine that they're doing or something like that. And even then, a lot of the animals like the axis deer and stuff like that, you really don't always see them at the feeders. They know the brush very well. They have their own system in the especially in hill country. Texas hill country is thick. They have their own systems in there that you're just not, even with a feeder, you don't always have that opportunity there. So
Yeah.
it's pretty interesting, man. I remember the GM once saying, and he was like, "Man, a lot of people will sit there and say, 'Oh, I could do that. It's just shooting fish in a barrel.'" He's like, "If you think it's that easy, walk out there and try." He's like, "Go for it. Like, go see if you can just walk out there and shoot one." It's not there. Another fact to kind of noodle on is I would say it is more opportunistic. Obviously, there's more animals in there than there is like on general public land, right? Because you've got multiple exotic species and you got whitetail and turkey and all that stuff. So I would say your opportunity is increased, your shot opportunity is increased, but at the same time, those animals are pressured every single day. And it's probably, I would say, not as habitual for like a public land animal. Yeah, a public land animal might be pressured by like coyotes or mountain lions, but they're not being hunted every single day like these animals in a high fence situation are. So they're much, much more leery to come into feeders. They know if a blind's there. So a lot of times, sometimes there's certain species you just have to spot and stock. Like it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So there's a few things to kind of noodle on within that like high fence mentality. It's not shooting fish in a barrel like some people think. But yeah, I hosted my own bow hunting camp out there. I just said, hey, I had some followers here and I didn't want to blow up my personal public land spot. So I was like, well, would you guys come to Texas? Handful of guys volunteered, said, yeah, I'll do it. They were public land hunters. They came out with me just on my recommendation, saying it was fun to try. And they've been back several times now. They're all three of those guys are coming back with me again this February. They're like, oh man, this isn't anything like we thought it was. And we've been having a good time. It's pretty cool to see people's minds kind of change.
That's awesome. Yeah, one of the misconceptions surrounding feeders, and this
Mhm.
goes for whether you have a high fence, or it's just like regular ranch land,
Yeah.
is you can't effectively glass nor spot and stock in Texas specifically.
Yeah.
And I have never been to Louisiana or Arkansas or these other places like moving further east. So, but what I can say is that between everything trying to stab you, poke you, or like it's really impossible to move in a stealthy manner through any
Yes.
sort of brush. And with whitetail being as spooky as they are, like the first crunch and you're out of
Yep.
there.
Yep.
So I understand the need for feeders and blinds, and well, everyone has an opinion. Very few have perspectives. When you went on your first high fence hunt, what were the things that you learned? What were your takeaways right away?
Sure. I hate whitetail does, man. They ruin everything. A whitetail, especially a smart one, if she comes in, man, and she's just sitting there stomping and starting to snort, it's all over, and it ruins an opportunity for everything else. I would say like the notion that you're gonna go there and just if you have a target animal or whatever it is you're going there. So like me, I specifically had one animal that I wanted to shoot my first time, and that was an axis deer. Went in with the idea of doing that. I didn't even have a shot opportunity on one until day 5. I never saw one ever, and that was like wild to me. And so we ended up going out and kind of changed our game plan. I had sat and sat and sat, and I'm not a guy that really likes to sit, man. I'm a mover. Like I like to pound ground. So I was like, hey, let's just try and go do a spot and stock. Let's just walk around and see if we bump into something. And it ended up working out that time, but that's pretty rare. Like that's not really conducive to the kind of hunting there in the middle of hill country, just because it's so thick.
Hmm.
But man, it's just like it takes time. It's still you're gonna need 3, 4, 5 days to get it done. Um, and especially in 8,000 acres, that's a good chunk of land. And some of the other ranches that are out there are much bigger than that.
Yeah.
We're not the biggest ranch by any means. So yeah, it's just kind of having a guide that's knowledgeable helps a lot, but at the same time, like expect to grind it out a little bit. It's not just going to happen on command at all.
Yeah. Was a part of the adventure lost? Like Western hunting, I always talk about it as like this manifest destiny for humanity in the hunting cultures. Like, eventually there's no more Western land to go, so you got to go up into the mountains and find
Yep.
yourself, find the animals, all that stuff. Did you have that adventure still in those types of hunts, or what was it like?
Definitely had the adventure. So that hunt specifically at the CK was my first out of state hunt. I had never done any sort of out of state hunting. Now, whether or not you've done out of state hunting and stuff before, there's still nothing really like hunting Texas hill country. So, like the moment you go there, one of the coolest things, I don't know where I have it, but one of the coolest things to me is like there are Indian arrowheads all over the place, just laying on the ground. And so it was like, to me, it was this new thing where I was like, dude, and I get, I've probably been to places that Indians have hunted before, but I was like, man, I'm hunting like where these guys were actively hunting. Like there's a broadhead arrowhead right there. There's an arrowhead right here. Um, so that was kind of cool. The terrain overall too was very different from Arizona. It was nothing like I was used to. There's like the tops of the scrub oak canopy. There's like a opening to the top of the tall yellow grass, and then there's the tall yellow grass where you don't see anything. But between there, if you like kneel down and look, you see a super far out, and it just like there's animals all underneath there. You can see out for a ways. It's just a different world.
Yeah.
So that was really cool. But yeah, I'd say definitely didn't take away from anything knowing that, there's a fence over there. You could walk around all day and try and shoot something and it would still take a lot of time.
So being a public land hunter and, you go into like states of Wyoming, Montana, um, some parts of Colorado, and you get a checkerboarding, right? So everyone's like, oh,
Oh, yeah.
public land, no high fences, but you're still forced to hunt within the boundaries, more or less an invisible fence of what you can and cannot do.
Sure.
Was that a aha moment, a perspective? And now you said it was your first out of state hunt. So since then, have you kind of reflected back upon that and be like, there's really no difference in that regard, or what was your thought?
Yeah, I'd agree, man. I would say as far as the confines that we as humans have, for sure, there's like places that I can't go that, it doesn't matter whether there's a real fence there or an invisible fence there. Like it's just not going to happen, especially with unit boundaries and, public land, slowly disappearing in some certain, locations and stuff like that. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, it never really changed the scenario for me much when I went to Texas. Like you could still walk a long ways, and it was just like being here at home, being like, all right, well, I'd probably hit a different unit or a unit border right about now back in Arizona. So,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
What was the feedback that your hunters that you brought out with you from social media, um, that were public land hunters and that was their first time doing it? What's the feedback that they've given you since?
Let's see. There's a buddy of mine, Jim. I brought him out there, and he never really gave me any negative feedback or like notions that he had come up with beforehand. But I just remember his like the light in his eyes afterwards. I asked him. I said, "Hey, man, did you feel like this was shooting fish in a barrel? What'd you think about high fence hunting?" He's like, "Well." He's like, no. He's like, honestly, he wanted an axis as well, and he went the entire camp without ever shooting an axis or having a shot opportunity on one. And so
Yeah.
he was like, dude, he's like, this is tough. Like, and we tried spot and stalking some meal guy. Like he at a certain point, he told me, this blew my mind. He goes, if a decent or a trophy size axis comes in, he goes, you shoot it and I'll just pay for it. I just want it. And I was like, okay. Like he got that to that level of like frustration where he was like, I just want one on the ground and we can't get it done.
Yeah.
That was feedback that I had gotten from him. I went out with my best friend the first time we went to the CK. My buddy Jake went with me too.
Is that
And he
is
had,
are you're talking about your buddy Jake from State Farm?
yes, sir.
Yeah. He's on. Yeah, Jake
Yep.
said he had a blast.
Yep. Yeah. He had an absolute blast, man. You know,
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. As a thank you, I got more discount codes for all of you. If you are in the market for anything in regards to calls, whether it's elk calls, turkey calls, deer, or predator calls, you can save 15% on all Rocky Mountain hunting calls by using the code SOULSEEKERS. That's all one word. And if you're in the market for hard side hydration, a better way to hydrate, go check out hardsidehydration.com. Use the code SOULSEEKERS10 to save 10%. And we also have a discount at Graxaw.com. That is, Graxaw is the leader in ultralight game bags and other backcountry gear. Light, fast, and efficient is their motto. Use a code SOULSEEKERS, all one word, to save 10% at checkout.
I would say he kind of had maybe some of the same like reserves as me possibly at first of like, you're just kind of leery about it. You're on the fence about it, not to make a pun, but yeah. And so he just ended up having a great time, and he'll be coming back out again with me in February as well. So everyone that I've taken out there has 100% been a yes for a return.
Interesting. I
Yep.
love that.
Yep. Yep.
One of the things that I'm encountering with this idea of lease hunting. So I don't even know how many acres my portion of my lease is. I'm leasing
Okay.
it from a larger ranch corporation. There's multiple hunters that have different sections on the lease, and so I set up 2 blinds, 2 feeders on opposite sides. I ironically in Texas very hard to come by water, but I have what they deemed as a lake, year-round water on my portion of the lease. And I'm sitting there and I'm setting it up, and I'm like, okay, this is gonna be awesome. But one of my blinds is bordering a fence line, which on that other side of the fence line is a different property, not even a part of my ranch. And I quickly just started thinking about this week as deer season was beginning to open. And I was like, well, crap, I've never actually encountered this before, but I'm assuming I'm going to shoot a buck, and then it's either going to run onto somebody else's lease or somebody else's land. And I was like, okay, well, what do I do? Do I have to contact the landowner? Do I have to figure out who the other leaser is that's in the field next to me? And then it's like, I was like, well, okay, then what? And these ideas, or like when spring turkey comes around, okay, I've seen some gobblers on the property, and I'm ready to like get after it. But then I'm like, okay, I have to stop within my boundaries if I can't get them to cross over. And so it's just really blowing my mind. So when you're talking about high fence, I mean, that kind of solves those issues that a newer hunter specifically would have a lot of potential frustrations or pitfalls that they would encounter in those scenarios, right?
Yep.
When we start to think about so many things like, oh, I have to worry about this or I have to worry about this, the movie The Last Samurai with Tom
Oh yeah.
Cruise, when he's like, too many mine,
Too many mind, no mind.
one mind.
Yep. Yep.
Like,
That's my favorite movie.
yeah, it's like, think about the task at hand. What is my job? My job is to kill this animal. That is why I'm out here. And so I need to focus on that and not get distracted by all the minutia of what is or potentially could be. Take it one step at a time. Let's go through this process.
Yep.
So from this high fence hunting, now you said this 2017 was your first hunt, your first mule deer.
2018, yeah, was my first
2018.
time ever. Yep.
And so then you've gone to Texas a couple different times.
Yep.
From that point, you're had a couple years of public land hunting under your belt. You've had a couple years of experiencing what the high fence is all about.
Oh yeah.
Did you feel like you wanted more as a hunter?
Kind of. I had like every hunter kind of starts to get a bucket list hunt in mind. I was super lucky that I was able to do that at the CK. So I accomplished that, and then it was kind of like I felt like I was like, well, what do I do now? And I was like, well, I guess I mean, I'm still happy just hunting. Like it doesn't matter. I'd like more elk tags and stuff, and
Right.
I got my first turkey under my belt with Jake, and so that was really cool. So it's kind of starting to check mark certain species and stuff. I don't really have a bug for sheep. They don't necessarily do anything for me yet. So yeah, I was just kind of at this like stalemate of like, well, I'm super happy just hunting what I have for right now. But yeah, I was like, it'd be cool to like kind of venture out and see what else is out there. I'd like to go do more other state hunts and stuff like that. And of course, there's this other looming thing that everybody always talks about, and that's like Africa, right? Like all the hunters. I've got a buddy that I'm good acquaintances with, and he's going to like Africa He just did a ibex hunt. He's going all over the world and doing all these different things. So you kind of see the outliers doing some of those things, and starting you'll have those pop up in your feed every once in a while.
Yeah.
Yep.
I applied for a job at Dallas Safari Club this last fall,
Oh, cool.
and
Heck yeah.
kind of blew my mind. I didn't really know what I was stepping into in regards to how serious they take it. Maybe that sounds weird. I didn't realize how big of a deal Africa hunting was within hunting in North America. And
I didn't either until like a year ago, man. I just really didn't comprehend it until I started to be immersed into it, and I was like, whoa.
yeah,
Like,
like people, multiple people said the very first time you go to Africa, you'll be planning your return trip before you're even home.
100%. 100%.
So, and then you got guys like Robbie Kroger at Blood Origins that talk so much about the universal hunting, not just the North American hunting. And this is where everyone has an opinion. Very few people have perspectives. And one of the misconceptions that we didn't talk on the high fence hunting, which I feel blends very nicely into this whole Africa topic,
Mhm.
is that hunting has become a rich man's sport. And I say
Mm.
sport, not game, not lifestyle, not passion or obsession. It feels like at times, and even I'm probably speaking incorrectly at this moment, like the haves and the have-nots, right? It's the, oh, well, you can afford a $10,000 whitetail hunt or an $8,000 axis hunt, or whatever they end up costing and different things.
Right.
Like that's not everybody's, like not everyone can do that.
Sure.
So and then you start talking about Africa, it's like airfare,
Mm.
lodging, like the experience, like everything that goes into it. Um, Before we talk about the dollars and cents, because that's going to be a topic for itself, take us through this idea of you going to Africa or planning your first hunt and everything that went into it.
Yeah. um, our goal for the CK was that we were going to start doing some CK Worldwide stuff. CK Worldwide has now since launched, but we were having some clients that were kind of maturing out of the ranch. I mean, you have some guys that come in that are serious hunters, and they've about darn near killed like the 25 plus exotic species that we have at the ranch. And so we had kind of already started on the down low, been taking some of our clients over there, and just because we know people over there, we have African PHs that come to Texas and guide for us. And so it's kind of like this relationship had already formed.
Let me jump in here real quick because I didn't
Yeah.
know what a PH was until
Okay.
I went to Dallas Safari Club and got immersed in that culture.
Yep.
In Africa, they refer to hunting guides as professional hunters, and professional
Yep.
hunter broken down as a PH. So all you listeners, now you understand, because that is something
Yep.
like just way over the head.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's a pretty cool thing too when you do it. Like, it seems like their process is a little more rigorous than ours in terms of just getting your guide's license. Like, they actually have to study for it. They have like this crazy ledger system and stuff. They keep track of all these different. I was watching them deal with everything after our trip in Africa, and I was like, good grief. I'll say that though. I will preface with I haven't hunted with a guide here in Arizona, so maybe it is pretty close. But just the system that they have and everything, and kind of watching their culture over there and how they handle it and stuff, it's a big deal. But yeah, so like we were just kind of, all right, well, what's the next step for some of our clients? And so it was like, well, let's set up this thing called CK Worldwide, where we take clients around the world, not just Africa. We've got a concession that's in Scotland that'll be hunting red stag in the Highlands of Scotland. You'll stay in a castle, and you'll go out there, and it's the real deal, man. But yeah, it's cool. So we ended up going to Africa. One of the big things, we have 5 pillars. That's a part of our mission statement, but one of the big things is safety. People think of Africa as like some almost like a Wild West kind of place or something, and it's not. I mean, yeah, sure, there's parts that are dangerous, but what the big thing for us was part of the 5 pillars of safety. We are never going to take a client any place that we have not been ourselves.
Mm.
And so it was like, all right, well, let's go do this. And so we went out there. 2 of the guides from the ranch also went. Guys, Adam and Cooper, known them since I've been working there, and they went as well. And so there was the 3 amigos, me, Adam, and Cooper, were pretty much there to hunt and check it out and experience Africa. So it was pretty cool.
What was your take on Africa hunting? Like, was it as difficult to get there as you thought? And then when you were there, was it like, oh, this is familiar, or was it super foreign?
Um, well, getting there, that was my big mental hurdle. I was like, man, so I had to fly from Phoenix to Newark, which was like 5.5 hours, and then like a 1 or 2 hour layover in Newark, and then a 15-hour flight from Newark to Johannesburg, and then from Johannesburg a 5-hour drive to our concession where we were staying.
Yeah.
And so I'm just sitting there looking at this time, and I'm like, ugh. And honestly, it wasn't bad. Like, I had stuff to keep me occupied. There's movies. You get fed 2 meals on the plane. They're perfectly timed. Like, the travel is very well done. And there's only like a couple of main flights that take you from Newark to Johannesburg, and they're perfectly timed so that it almost syncs you up with the time zone of when you're landing. It's
Hmm.
really nice. Like, it wasn't bad. I wouldn't say I experienced jet lag that terribly. So that was pretty cool. That was my big mental hurdle there. The similarities, their Impala, I would say, like, for me, the things that clicked right away is like their Impala is like our whitetail. Like, they're everywhere.
Okay.
And so that was kind of something similar that I noticed. But honestly, other than that, man, everything was kind of foreign. Like, the stark contrast is you get there and the guides go, all right, I know you are probably used to hunting whitetail, or you're used to getting up early before sunrise, being in the blind, and then, magic hour for you guys is like, sunrise, maybe an hour or two after that, and then you're done for the day. He goes, throw all of that out the window. In Africa, it's like 9 or 10 a.m., and then it goes all the way till about 2 or 3, and then you're done for the day. Like, there's no point in sitting in the morning or evening because they don't come in to eat or get water or anything. So it's that kind of a stark contrast from what you're used to, and you're like, whoa, what in the world?
Huh.
So it's
Fascinating.
quite a bit different. Yeah, it's
W-
pretty different.
Was your hunt in Africa a high fence hunt as well?
Yes and no. So I hunted 2 different concessions. The first place that we went to, the first animal that I shot was an Impala, and that was a completely free range Impala. That was actually, I would say, the first place was where we probably saw the largest variety of animals. Like, I was like 6 yards from an elephant. We had an elephant come into our blind, which was absolutely terrifying.
Whoa.
Yeah, yeah. The day before, the guides said if those elephant know that you're in that blind, there's a high opportunity that they could charge. Like, they're very aggressive. They're not to mess around with. It's wild. So this elephant comes in, and me and my my buddy, I'm filming for my buddy Cooper, and Cooper looks at me. He's like, "Dude, I am not okay with this." And it's like, well, you can't get out and run because they run 40 miles an hour. They'll catch you.
Right.
And it ended up being okay. I the first thing that went through my mind was like, look at our pH. I looked at our pH, and they've got, I think, like 470s or some crazy elephant round with them. And he's just calm. And I was like, well, he's fine. I'm fine. Like, he doesn't seem to be freaking out, so there's no reason to be alert. So we just sat there and watched this elephant eat, man. And it was cool. But I'd say there we saw a lot of variety of animals. And then we flipped over to the high fence. Now, it is a high fence concession, but it's 70,000 acres with no fences,
No
breaking
dividing.
that.
Just
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. So they do not introduce any animals to it. All the animals that they have that are in their population in that high fence area are all reproducing on their own. They just manage the ecosystem pretty much, and they just don't overhunt it. They set their own quotas, they do their counts, and they make sure that they never teeter into an unstable environment for those animals. But I mean, as far as I'm concerned, yeah, there's a fence there, but come on, like 70,000 acres is that doesn't matter.
Right, right. I mean,
you know?
70,000 acres, I mean, I'm trying to consider that's larger than most counties in
Yeah.
different states, and you know, that's pretty substantial.
Yep. Yep.
So,
That's a large chunk of land.
so that's fascinating that they're not they are only managing whatever got caught within the building of the fence.
Yep.
But with that, are they facing poachers from the outside, or like are they having to patrol the fence lines, and how does that work?
So I saw that was crazy for me, was like you hear of poaching, right? The word's out there, you hear of, but usually it's things like rhinos, that's what comes into your mind, elephants, stuff like that, you think of poaching. And I remember we were sitting at the free range concession that we went to, and this Impala came in, and I was like, that thing looks weird. I'm like, what the heck? And he's got a metal wire snare wrapped around his neck, and it went all the way to his back. I have pictures and photos of him. I took some, and it went all the way wrapped around both of his legs and had entangled both of his legs. And it was like that was the first time I had seen anything where it was like that was me witnessing poaching efforts in real time.
Hmm.
But to answer your question, yeah, they hire, I think he said he has like 5 or 6 anti-poaching teams. And it's like it's a no joke thing, man. They are armed. It's a very serious deal over there because it's very, very real and live, whether it's high fence or free range. But
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that the North American model of wildlife conservation is not everywhere. Like it's North America, and
yeah.
how we grow up is this idea of, oh, you can hunt, you can fish, you can go do this stuff. It's managed through the fish and game, but over in Africa, it's managed completely different. And the
Mhm.
biggest thing is that it is to it's hunting is larger than tourism over there as far as supporting the ecosystem,
Oh yeah.
and the culture of the areas.
Yep. Yeah, that was a big thing too, was seeing all of that. I did a really big interview piece with the owner of the concession that we went to, the 70,000 acre one. And he breaks it down pretty detailed of like all the stuff. Cause that's the big thing about Africa. You can't bring the meat back, right? So what happens to that? Well, we ate it every night that we were there. All of our appetizers, all of our main dishes and stuff was all the game. I ate my kudu, I ate my impala, I had impala schnitzel. It was awesome. Um, but then all of that meat trickles down and feeds the staff. It gives the ranch staff, it gives them and their families meat, and then all of that extra meat that doesn't get consumed there goes to the families of the staff that work there. So they take all that meat home and then they divvy it out into the local area right around there. It feeds all these people.
Hmm.
So it's not going to waste by any means. Absolutely not. Every single piece of that is utilized. We went to the skinning shed and I saw livers hanging up. I saw heart hanging up. I saw like all these, every piece of that animal was being taken out by the local villagers that are their, trackers, their skinners, their butchers, all that stuff. And all of that's taken home and used. So it was really cool to at least see that firsthand and be like, man, this is pretty sweet. Like all these people are going to have food because some American hunters came through and shot some stuff. So,
Yeah, and you're also putting financials into their pocket,
yep,
allowing them to actually live their lives.
yep,
One of the biggest aha moments for me is as an adult. So I'm a father of 3 young boys, and I don't know about you, Stephen,
mhm.
but last time I went to a zoo it was in my youth, right? Like
Yeah.
you grow up, you watch movies like The Jungle Book and different Disney movies that familiarize yourself with different animals, and then you go to a zoo and you're like, "Oh, look at these animals." And I'm sure seeing an elephant charge a blind is a whole lot different than looking at an elephant in a pen at a zoo where you can feed them and like experience them in a different manner.
Yeah.
Have you been back to a zoo since your youth or after going to Africa? And did it really like change your perspective of how you view animals?
I haven't been since Africa, but I've been since I've worked for the CK. My daughter, we've got a great zoo over here, and they have a lot of the exotics that we have at the CK. They have Axis, and I was telling my wife all these things because she loves Axis meat. So, and then in the petting zoo, they have some Axis does and stuff you can pet. And the animals there are so habituated. They're almost treated, like pets. They're very aware of humans, and they lose that fear. I would say the biggest thing that I would really use in the argument of like pro high fence hunting is every single animal that's in there is still wild. Like they want nothing to do with people. They see a person and they're out of there. Like, then they'll run to the other side of it as far as they can go. So I think that's something to keep in mind is that like it's by no means a zoo. We're not sitting there petting our, trophy access buck, our 34-inch access buck, feeding them a bottle or nothing like that. That's not what it's like. They live and they die out there all the time. They're predated on. We find kills all the time from either like coyotes or bobcats, stuff like that. So there's a whole ecosystem going on out there still. But going back to the zoo afterwards and stuff, I mean, it's a very different experience.
Yeah, I so early on in my hunting career, I took my family on a camping trip over to Idaho, and it is in Lewiston, Idaho, is the Jack O'Connor Center at Hell's Gate State Park. And if you ever get a chance to camp there, it's on the Snake River. It's pretty fascinating.
Okay.
But in the Jack O'Connor Center, it has all his mounts from all his different expeditions and hunts, and it has his tiger rugs and all sorts of stuff. I'm just like, wow. And it's like, okay, well, how could you get to a point where you want to hunt these other species beyond just what North America is providing? And I'm not there yet. And maybe you're new to it just like me. We haven't been doing it that long. So the idea of oh man, I like to choose my words carefully. I don't want to say conquering has a very egotistical connotation to it, right?
Sure.
Like, oh, look what I can do. Oh man. Oh. And we want to be humble in all things and also paint hunting in a positive light. However, the competition of that of like, okay, I want to pursue a different game. Does the game change at all? Or is it the same thing all over?
I guess I would say elaborate on that a little bit for me in terms of over in Africa versus here, or in terms of
does hunting here hunting the same over there? I know your PH was like, hey, take everything that you know about the golden hour and throw it out the window and all this stuff. But ultimately, is it still the purest form of what it is?
Oh, I mean, yeah, I would say one thing I noticed to speak of like the purest form, right? When you said that, I would say like the passion that lives over there through these PHs we spent way more time just being educated on everything and seeing how much they love the land. They love Africa. And I was like, dude, these guys are on fire for what they do. Like, this is cool. And it makes you get pumped up. And so then you start asking more questions. You're like, teach me this, because you see how happy they are to teach you.
Yeah.
And so you find that camaraderie of almost probably what it would be like for a father-son dynamic here, being taught by dad at deer camp. You almost turn that into the same thing through your PH while you're over there. It's really cool. But and again, it's nice because learning and always, like I said, never being the master, always being the student. You're starting over again when you go back over there. All the vitals for those animals, like my kudu shot. I shared it with some friends and they're like, oh, you shouldered them. And I was like, no, that's a heart punch. Like, all the vitals are way forward. They tell you the same thing again, like what you think you know about hunting times, same thing. What you think you know about shot placement, that's not accurate anymore. I shot an impala, almost tucked it like you would a whitetail in the armpit. And I was fortunate. I hit one lung, but it hit a rib and deflected to back a little bit. And I gut punched it on the way out. And it was like, I was like, dude, if that was an elk or a deer, that thing was like smoked. And he's like, yeah, no, you can't do that here. That animal would be gone if you hadn't caught that long. So yeah, it's crazy.
So are you trying to blow shoulders out and blow through shoulder blades, or how do you
Yeah. So I don't have an animal around here to show you, but yeah, basically you want to you there's say there's two legs, right? And you follow up the triangle of that leg. You want to go up 1/3 of the body, and it looks like you're putting it right on the shoulder blade. But then they show you some pictures where you can kind of see like a dark silhouette at the forefront, what was like almost in the brisket area. That's their actual shoulder blade. Their shoulder blade doesn't go straight up the leg bone itself. It actually kind of goes up, hooks over a little bit, and then comes up right here. So when it looks like you're going to shoulder an animal and go right into bone, you're not. You're blowing right through it, and you're hitting heart and definitely lungs. So it feels really weird. It feels wrong to do it when you're aiming at that target and stuff. But it's cool. They have a couple 3D targets when you get there, and so they say, okay, let's run over some stuff here first before we take you out because this is what you need to learn now.
how did you and goes very hand in hand with this whole idea of uh stands and feeders hunting,
Mm.
is hunting a water hole
Yeah.
in Africa has its own negative connotations, like, oh, resort to the water hole at the last option if you have to. And for people who don't understand, is like water is limited, and
Oh
so
yeah. Yeah.
all animals are going to come to it at some point. And so just sitting over a water hole has a negative connotation to it in the hunting world. And it's interesting. I want to break down barriers and opinions through this episode. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Man, I guess I haven't struggled with that as much per se because being in Arizona, like water's scarce here too, you know. So it was like that's always been a big contingency. That's kind of in part what we lost our trail cam usage to was because people were putting trail cams on water holes and they said it ruined the hunting experience and was an unfair advantage, blah blah blah. So I think I was kind of introduced to an open mind already to hunting water holes and stuff. So when a guide says, "Hey, we're going to go sit water," I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's what we do at home."
Yeah, that
So
makes sense.
yeah, in a drought in places that are dry or conducive to droughts, like that's you don't really have much of an option. But yeah, so it wasn't anything, I didn't feel anything negative about it going there and doing that. That was kind of like, well, this is the way that you have to hunt these types of, topography. This is your options that you have. You can try and spot and stalk, but again, their African bush is very much like Texas hill country. Like, good luck, man. And then there you've got black mambas and cobras and, Cape buffalo that'll trample you and kill you. Like, I'm not walking through there.
Right.
So,
I took my family out to my lease on Saturday, and I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna go take them fishing." And then I got out there and I looked at the brush. I was like, "I'm gonna have to come out here and mow or weed whack in order to even create a path if I'm gonna take my kids here." I have snake boots; they don't. And all of a sudden, like, everyone's like, "Oh, spot and stalk, take your shoes off, creep in." I was like, "Dude, I'm not taking my shoes off because of the rattlesnakes and the goat
yep.
heads and everything is
Oh,
is
yeah.
out to get you." So yeah, I mean, and this so if anyone who's on this Instagram live is listening, or you're on this podcast, and some takeaways is understanding how to speak about hunting. It is under attack constantly all over, and how we carry ourselves, how we speak about it, and understanding the different dynamics to hunting. And there's a reason why we have to do certain things, why we have to sit a tree stand or a blind over a feeder versus the spot and stock style, or why we can't just glass for miles and miles. And we have a lot of invisible fence lines or boundaries that we have to hunt within in order to still uh, be legal. And so this is one of the biggest things that I truly believe that people who are raised within the hunting culture, um, and you read my post that I wrote this week, where
Mhm.
just saying, I don't know, this is just how I've always done it, doesn't cut it.
Yeah.
It doesn't inspire a non-hunter. It doesn't give and we're not necessarily talking about anti-hunters, because anti-hunters are solidified in their thinking until they go through the experience, and I bet you they're gonna be like, okay, I see, yeah, I want some of this.
Yeah.
um,
Yep.
but it's the non-hunters, it's the voting public that is so far removed from what you do day in and day out that they're gonna lean with whatever the news, the headline says. Oh,
Yep.
well, look at these hunters, they're horrible people, blah blah blah. We have to be able to speak to this. We have to be able to address the misconceptions within the hunting world, and a lot of hunting podcasts are preaching to the choir. But this choir, I want you to actually understand, like, you have to know the Pittman-Robertson Act. You have to know the North American model of conservation for wildlife. These are paramount to promoting and making sure that hunting lasts for generations to come, that there is a thing called conservation, not just preservation, which is what anti-hunters want to make everything about. They want to preserve
Yeah.
wildlife, not conserve it.
Yeah. Well put, man.
I mean,
That's well put.
this is why I do it. I appreciate that. It's, you know, I sit here and in my office, or I go about my day, and I'm like, dude, there's this one thing that absolutely transformed my life, and that was hunting. And how could anybody else talk so negatively about it or want to take that away? The thing that
Yeah.
made me a better human, that was
Yeah.
directly correlated to me becoming a better husband, a better father, a better worker, a better whatever, you're attacking it and wanting to remove it from me.
Hmm.
So everyone, there's a guy, the founder of Howl for Wildlife. Are you familiar with them? Their
Oh yeah.
organization?
Yep.
On his social media, he made a post. It's like, how do we make hunting cool again? Not cool as in, oh, I want to do it, but like hunting and preserve and I've got to be careful on the word preservation. How do we make conservation cool again?
Right.
Right? Social media, Instagram is awesome. We talked about the whole algorithm and how Instagram's changed over the last couple of years. So
Yep.
how do we make conservation awesome? How do we make that cool? Right?
Yeah.
Um, what's your take on that?
Man, I would say the big thing, I think COVID, the pandemic, all that, I think really helped us a lot
Hmm.
because people were bored. They wanted to get out, right? They wanted to be outside, do something. So I think a lot of people turned to hunting or at least the outdoors. I think some of the big names in the industry right now are helping us a lot. Maybe putting more of like an athleticism approach to hunting, right? Like working out, being able to do like these ultra runs and stuff like that, or just being able to go crush a 20-mile elk hunt is a cool thing to do right now, right? It's
Hmm.
becoming more popular. I think that's helping a lot. A lot of people just wanting to know where their meat comes from, like the Future Hunters Summit program at the CK. Taking non-hunters off the street, saying, "Hey, we'll walk you through your first harvest from start to finish. We'll give you the gun, we'll give you the ammo." Like doing things like that. Some guys just don't know where to turn to and find help. So being able to do things like that, and then I think getting the message out there that hey, this is a finite renewable resource, and if we don't pay into it and cherish it, and who else is going to do it? Like PETA's not contributing enough money to sustain what this the wildlife conservation model by any stretch of the imagination. It all rides on hunters, and so I think that's a big thing to kind of think of, a bigger picture to have. And then I think it's really dependent too on just having an individuals having an open mind. If you're closed minded, and honestly, it's wild that you and I set up this podcast to talk about this topic, and within the last week, I had one guy comment on our social media, not mine, but my clients. Oh, that's a zoo, and I was like, I wanted to, and I can't through my clients' uh, page, I can't be like, it's not appropriate to do that. But I really wanted to be like, dude, have you even hunted a high fence operation before? My guess is no. You're just talking out, side of your ear or whatever, just throwing something out there, which then makes other hunters maybe have the same opinion and they haven't done it, like, what does that accomplish by you doing that and just, you know, uh, trying to bash another fellow hunting operation that just does it a different way?
Yeah.
There's nothing positive coming out of that, and so all it does is just create infighting, really.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of it. There's a lot of infighting. It's no secret. There's infighting throughout the hunting industry, but all the time. And at the end of the day, we're all on the same team. And I hate to sound cliche by saying that, but like, I think a big open mind is or having an open mind is a big thing. If you can do that and get over the idea that there's a fence there and just be like, well, you know what? I haven't experienced that, so I'm not going to attach an opinion to that yet. I think that's the biggest thing. And that's what I would tell my younger self who had some preconceived ideas of what it was like back in the day.
No prior expectations. Let's just accept the world and then respond to our experiences.
Yeah.
Powerful quote from World War II I want to share with you. You might have heard this before, but this is something that, for me, if people would actually take the time to inwardly reflect on this quote, it would lead to a lot of outward correction as far as uniting and making sure that hunting lasts for generations. And it's from Dr. Martin Niemöller out of World War II. He said, "First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me."
Yep.
That right there, or like, you could take that and apply it to a lot of angles in this life. Like, but when we talk about hunting, whether you are high fence hunting, Africa hunting, public land hunting, which has its own, like, oh yeah, I'm a public land hunter. Like, okay, I get it.
Yep.
Do you want it to last or do you not?
Yeah.
So often people grow up and never move farther than 50 miles from their hometown, and all they know is this tiny little world of relativism of, like, this is how the world operates. When I moved my family 2,000 miles from the state of Washington down to the state of Texas, it was very easy for me to rest on my laurels and be like, oh man, that's not my fight anymore. I don't have to be so vocal about spring bear hunting and cougar hunting and all these different things that are being attacked and taken away.
Yep.
Wrong. Like, that was the biggest slap in my face. Like, wake up, man. Just because, out of sight, out of mind, if we all have that ignorance is bliss mentality, then nothing is going to last and it's all going to get taken from us.
Yeah.
And it starts with being able to speak about it, like, my journey as a hunter. I was a school teacher and still am. And public education is typically a liberal job, especially in the state of Washington. And that was a part of why I ended up leaving the state of Washington, is because I had little girls transitioning to be boys, changing in my locker room as a PE teacher. And I'm like, I'm uncomfortable with what's going on. And let alone did I want my children to be in that sort of climate.
Right.
With that being said, is getting into hunting, it was like I was almost afraid or ashamed to share with people that I was a hunter. It's like, oh, wait, you hunt? Oh, how could you do that? Well, what about hunting elephants? What about Cecil the lion? What about, and these non-hunters or anti-hunters throw out all these headline moments that we, or myself specifically, I didn't know how to speak towards.
Sure.
And so I believe that there is a gap, a misconception between learning how to hunt, knowing how to hunt, learning how to speak about hunting, and knowing how to speak and defend hunting.
Right.
And if those two, like, you want to reinvent hunter safety, bam, let's marry those two. Okay,
Yeah.
here's proper, don't shoot on a horizon that's at an animal skyline. And also, don't forget about the North American model of wildlife conservation, because without the conservation efforts of all the taxes, dollars, blah blah blah, you know, like,
Yep.
oh, here's some other spots. Did you know that the animals in which are killed in Africa, that meat goes to feed the local tribes and communities? Oh, you didn't? Oh, so it's
Yeah.
not wasted? Have you ever killed a rat or a mouse in your house? Oh, so you have a different value system for qualification of animal? Like you
Hmm.
value this animal because it reminds you of a stuffed animal rather than you know what I mean? Like when you
Yeah.
start to break it down for people, it's lunacy how they can qualify or quantify one life form over another and say, "How dare you? How dare you?"
Yep.
Have you had
Absolutely.
experiences like that?
Yeah, man, I've been lucky that I say lucky, but I have had
Blessed.
all of the experiences, both negative to the extreme. I had a real estate client that was a hardcore vegan and an animal rights activist, and I did not know it.
Mm.
And she asked me, she said, "Well, what did we're shooting a house. I'm doing her marketing stuff, whatnot." And she goes, "Oh, what'd you do this weekend?" And I was like, "Oh, I went bear hunting." And she went, "What?" And fired me on the spot, basically ripped into me, sent me out of the house, and I've never heard from her again. And I was like, huh. But at the same time, like, I'm glad I got to experience that because saw, other than like online interaction, face to face, what it was like for somebody that had those beliefs. Then I've had, people that have been like lifelong hunters, and you just immediately have camaraderie with them. And then I've seen guys that have never done hunting ever, and I've been able to share the experience of their first harvest with them, literally side by side,
Mhm.
watching them experience it for their first time, and you see that spark in their eyes, and they're eating it that night, and it's like it just clicks, and they're like, wow, this is what this is all about. Oh, and then, like you said, oh, and by the way, you just contributed to conservation. You just paid into the Robertson Pit or Pittman Robertson Act and everything, and that it just all like clicks for them. Like, okay, now I get it.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool to see those.
Have you ever heard my story of my very first kill?
I have not. No.
Okay, so I'm bringing you on as a guest, so I don't want to
Yeah.
necessarily like
No, do
uh,
it, man.
just long-winded. I killed my very first animal. So I was a bear hunter before anything else. I've killed more bears
Okay.
than I have deer, um, which is like phenomenal. But I was a high school football coach in the state of Washington, and high school football started around August 16th. I found out that bears started August 1st, and I was like, well,
uh,
I guess I'm going to be a bear hunter because I don't have time to dedicate towards, actually chasing deer and all this other stuff.
yeah.
Well, I ended up shooting 9 miles into the backcountry. I backpacked 9 miles into the
Mhm.
Cascade Mountains in the state of Washington, killed a bear that was spotted by a female yoga instructor from like inner downtown Seattle. She went on a day hike with her two male students and a dog all the
Oh,
way, like that's an 18-mile round trip day hike. That's
that's a
pretty
hike.
that's
Yeah.
pretty legit.
Uh-huh.
But I was like, dude, these people are gonna ruin the hunt. They saw that we were in camo. They're like, why are you in camo? No, we're hunting. You can hunt? Yeah, what are you hunting? Bear. Wait, you can hunt bear? Wait, there's bears up there? They're like
Uh-huh.
disconnected totally.
Yeah.
Well, she ended up spotting the bear that I ended up chasing down and shooting like a couple hundred yards away from them. And they're like, is it safe? Is it, are we good? And I got to have that experience with them and for them
Uh-huh.
to be like, whoa, like, like this was my thought of hunting.
Yeah.
Now I
Yeah.
actually saw it firsthand.
Hmm.
Out of the three, one guy wanted nothing to do with it still.
Okay.
But the female and one of the other students, she was like, can I touch it? Like, can it like mind blown?
Yeah.
Because how many
Yeah.
people ever see a bear in the wild, really?
Right.
You know,
Let alone right in front of you and be able to touch it and be like, here it is.
Yeah. And so from that moment, beyond it being my very first hunt where I killed an animal, it
Mhm.
was also a moment where I instantly had to learn how to defend hunting.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why there's no coincidences. That's
Yeah.
why this is a Soul Seekers podcast. Like, this is my mission, is to
Yep.
go out there and transform lives. Not everyone. Yeah, Tyler Nelson. Shout out to Tyler Nelson. He took me on my very first duck hunt. He says it
Oh,
was
nice.
the footwear. I left out. I believe I'm the only person in the world. I hold a world record to kill a black bear in Birkenstocks. So that was I chased it down in my camp shoes, and so that was also my, like, I used to work at REI. That was my connection with
Yep.
the granola world.
My first backpack was an REI backpack that I took out.
Yes, dude, that's what I packed that bear out with. It was horrible. Horrible. But the point that I wanted to make is that there are no coincidences, and the minute that we brush things off as, that was just a coincidence,
Mm.
is the minute that we're leaving ourselves open for debate, for attack, for not being prepared.
Mhm.
You could take that to any aspect of your life, work, all
Yep.
this. But the idea is that you want to always prepare for action. I was talking with Brian Lynn, vice president of marketing at the Sportsman's Alliance. He's a buddy of mine, and he says, well, in the hunting world, the conservation organizations and hunters in general are always on defense. It's
Mhm.
the anti-hunting groups or the preservation groups that are always on the attack.
Yeah.
And I was chewing on that for the longest time. I was like, that has to change. And that
Mhm.
starts by promoting it,
Yeah.
by, the making bow hunting cool again through endurance running, like, oh, that guy is out there doing this. Well, what else does he do? Oh, he's also doing,
Yep.
but it starts with the spoken word, right? So, are you a father?
Yeah, I've got 3 kids.
Could you imagine looking at your kids and not saying a word to them and just looking at them
No.
and in your head thinking, I love you, but never verbalizing
Mm,
it to them?
yeah. Yep.
There would be a giant disconnect between your children and you, and there would be some sort of childhood trauma that would then grow to be something larger. My dad never loved me, or he never said I loved you. You know,
Yep.
the power in the verbal spoken word is life changing. I believe, in the
Mhm.
Bible it says the tongue has the power of life and death. And
Yep.
it's and we get to wield it. We get to
Yeah.
swing our sword, man. Like, let's go to battle. Let's make this world what we want it to be, and let's get after it. Let's start being on attack. And how do we do that? We do that by saying, I'm a hunter. I love this. It's transformed my life. You're going to love it if you just give it a chance. Oh, you're not a hunter? Okay, I believe in roles also. You don't have to hunt. You just have to be pro hunting and vote for it in this legislation, and don't be anti against it. And and it starts,
Yeah.
it's fun. Kind of like what you were
Yep.
talking about, these African um, PHs. Like, they kind of they got you going,
Yeah.
didn't they?
They did, definitely. Yep. Yeah, I agree, man. It's being not just excited about the hunt. Obviously, like our own personal hunts get us jazzed up, and but then like, what are we doing to promote that to other people? Whether it's like a cookout at my neighbor's house, and I just take some summer sausage over there. I'm like, oh hey, by the way, that's buffalo. I shot that, and they're like, what? Like, and it's introducing. My thing has been introducing a lot of people to it through food.
Hmm.
You're like,
Yep.
hey man, try this. I'm like dying and chomping at the bit to do like a cooking channel
Yeah.
on just some social media stuff and just be like, hey, what is the versatility of meat? How do you introduce it to people? Like, try this.
So that's very interesting that you say that. Here's a part of the education that I've experienced in regards to the food of wild game. I had a neighbor who actually used to work at CNN. He worked at CNN remotely, and if we're gonna stereotype people, typically that's more of a left-leaning human, and typically someone who lives in the city is not gonna be an outdoorsy to the hunting aspect.
Mhm.
So I did what every good hunting neighbor does, and oh man, well, would you like to try some meat?
Uh-huh.
So I gave him some elk backstrap,
Ooh.
prized meat, like like
That's generous, man. That's
dude,
generous.
right? Because I was like, well, I don't want to give him, some cut off the back leg that might be a little chewy, and. So I gave him some prize cuts. What I failed to do was to tell him how to cook it.
Oh yeah.
And so he ended up being I was like, "Oh, hey, how is that those steaks?" And
Hmm.
he was like, "Yeah, I didn't really like them." And
Oh
and
no.
and I was like, "Really? How did you cook them?" He was like, "Oh, I just put them on the gas barbecue and cooked them." And I was like, "Okay." I set him up for failure. I did
Mm.
hunting a disservice by not actually communicating all the way through. And it's funny to like look at it and we can laugh now, but ultimately, I didn't do hunting justice because now is he not going to necessarily maybe want to hunt, but now he's like, oh, I don't even think the meat's worth it. So at what point is that? What's the draw for me to go experience this?
Yeah, yeah.
So promoting hunting, promoting mentorship, promoting hunter recruitment, advocacy, we really have to have a A through Z mentality. It's not just
Mhm.
giving someone coordinates to a location of like, hey, this is a good hunting spot, go check it out. It's time, it's follow up, it's communicating. And I said this earlier,
Mhm.
every small detail that we might just throw away is like, oh, that's just how I've always done it. That doesn't work. That doesn't cut it. Have you had any experiences like that yet?
In terms of like trying to introduce somebody to it and
Yeah.
kind of either succeeding or falling on my face with it. Yeah, man, I've been very blessed in the sense that I've had mostly positive experiences from it. A couple of guys at my church have gotten bows and started to get into it and stuff. There's one guy that's never done it in his life, and there's kind of a trio of us that hang out, and he just said, "Oh, hey, by the way, Scott wants to get into hunting." He told me that yesterday, and I was like, "Yeah, sweet." And so, but then like I mean, my 5-year-old just shot her first dove last week when dove season opened. So, doing cool stuff like that. She's like, "Dad, I want to go out with you." I was like, "All right, well, let's try this and see how it goes." But yeah, I mean, like I said, just giving people different, culinary experiences. Like, "Oh, hey, try this and see what you think of it," and stuff like that. Has been really successful as well, just in terms of like trying to promote it and getting it out to other people. So
Yeah.
it's been cool.
I had a challenge one time that got shout out to Jeremiah Doughty of From Field to Plate, um,
Yep.
the wild chef himself. He said, "Stop putting Montreal seasoning on wild game."
Yeah, guilty. Guilty.
Not only have I grown in my hunting skills, I've also grown in my cooking skills and my
Yeah.
palate as well. Uh, and I think that is a misconception within the hunting world is that, um, yes, if someone's new, maybe throw some Montreal onto it, you know,
Yep.
get them comfortable with what they're eating, but then eventually grow to enjoy the meat in different ways without covering it up. You know,
Yeah.
every this is what drives me wild about hunting is Oh man, you take that, you wrap it in some bacon. Well, yeah, man. Anytime you're masking flavors with bacon, oh, that was great. That was wonderful. I'd totally eat that again.
Yeah, yeah.
um,
Yeah, I mean, even within hunting itself, man, there's I guess you could say stereotypes, or just like a lot of people are very much rule of thumb. You got to add some beef fat to your meat and stuff.
mhm.
Like that was something that I did for a long time when I first started hunting, and now I don't. I'm like lean, and I even tell processors that sometimes. Like when I shot my buffalo, they're like, "Oh yeah, you're gonna want beef fat in your summer sausage." I was like, "No." I was like, "Just straight." He's like, "You're kidding." He's like, "Dude, it's not gonna turn out." And I was like, "No, just that's just how I want it." And he's like, "Okay." And the summer sausage is so dang good, man. And he was like adamant that I put it in there, and I was like, "I just don't want to do it." Which to each their own. Like I'm not knocking on you if you decide to put beef fat in there, go for it. Like by all means. But for me, it was just like, hey, this is the meat that I want to eat. I only want pure game meat out of this.
Yeah.
And so just doing something like that and overcoming, not overcoming necessarily, but just transitioning into the idea that it was just going to be through and through game meat only,
Yeah.
was something just little that I decided to do.
Yep. Hey, let's shift gears here real quick as we wrap this podcast up here in a little bit.
Okay.
One of the things you said, you have Native American background ancestry, right?
Yeah, it was. It's supposed to be. I'm trying to think what it's called. Yaqui Pasqua. They're like, and I hope I don't butcher this because if somebody's a Yaqui and they're watching this, they're gonna hate me. But it's supposed to be like Native Americans in the northern mountains of Mexico.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So there was a guest who I've had on this podcast two times. So I'd highly recommend you checking out these episodes.
Okay.
Guy's name is Tim Corcoran, and he is the founder of Purpose Mountain. And
Okay.
he is somebody who actually got into hunting in a roundabout way,
Mhm.
but he believes in coming of age ceremonies and vision
Sure.
quests, and
Yep.
he used to live on a reservation for a while and be tutored and immersed in the Native American culture.
Yeah.
And here's a question that I have for you, because this is very interesting, and I'll give you some background to set this up a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, down here in Texas, I got this lease, and I got cell cams, I got game cameras, and in the whitetail world, which I'm unfamiliar with, it's you have target bucks. Like, okay,
Uh,
this is the
okay.
animal I'm hunting. We're
Yep.
going after this, or maybe I'll add these guys to the hit list. Whitetail culture. You name deer, name bucks, and all that.
Sure.
So, I put up a poll recently on social media, and I posted, I would consider a very nice buck. Like, I don't
Oh
know
yeah.
if it was a 8 point or 10 point, but like it was not tall and narrow. It wasn't super old, but it just is classy. Like, oh yeah,
Yep.
it had symmetry. It was beautiful. I posted shoot or pass, and every response that I got on that from somebody who wasn't from Texas said shoot.
Shoot.
Everyone from Texas who responded said pass. And so, how I'm tying this in with this previous guest, Tim Corcoran, is he lives by the motto of being connected with nature, and in Native American culture, of you do not pass up an animal that presents itself to you.
Yep.
So, a misconception within hunting is that we're hunting only for the antlers. Or then you take that, and in public land, you kind of got to, depending on how much time you have, because time plays a big role in that,
Sure.
is
Yeah.
you take the first legal animal that you have, or you apply it to high fence hunting. It's like, oh, well, I know there's way better in here. Like, have you ever thought about that? And then do you apply any sort of boundaries or rules to your hunts?
Sure. Yeah, I think you and I had some back and forth too on that post. I remember I was like, "Well, it depends. Like, what are you hunting for, man? Are you hunting for, you know, just is it like, well, I'm going to hold out for this one specific buck, and that's what you have your mindset? And cool, yeah, go for that. Don't pass on that. But if it's like let me stop right there. Even when I was in Africa, so when I was in Africa and that first Impala walked in, he sat there and he went perfect shot angle for me and everything. And I kind of looked at my guide and he looked at me. He said, "That's not the biggest Impala that I've seen. There's much bigger." And I was like, "Okay." He goes, "But the way that he's just standing there right now and he's presenting it to you, he goes, here, he's like, we believe that that's a gift from the hunting gods." And he goes, "If you pass that up, he's like, you're gonna have bad luck on the rest of your hunt." And I was like, for me, that's the same thing. I've had very uncanny. It's hard to ignore. Something in your head knows when an animal gives you an opportunity, and you're like, "There's something weird about this moment. The way that I'm connecting with the animal, it feels like I should shoot." And so I very much believe in that big time, even though I'm not like super into the Native American culture. I have more like Christian beliefs and stuff, but at the same time, like I don't have any qualms with saying like that animal is a gift to you. And so you should take that opportunity, absolutely. But I've done that with several of my animals as well, where it was just like an undeniable interaction experience between me and the animal. And it was like, yeah, that right there, that's my animal. I'm going to harvest it.
So, have you heard of the 5 stages of a hunter?
I believe so. I think I've been introduced to it. I'm not super familiar on it, but I know
Okay.
someone's introduced me into it before. Yeah.
So I'm gonna refresh you on this real quick.
Okay.
So the five stages of a hunter is the very first. And I'm gonna pull up a website right here because I want to get this correct. How the verbiage, I call it differently. I actually refer to it as 3 stages, but
Okay.
Boone and Crockett and different organizations refer to it as 5 stages.
Mm,
So
okay.
the first stage of a hunter is the shooter stage. I'm getting into hunting. I have this weapon. I just want to shoot this weapon.
Yep.
Like I don't want to just be hiking a hiker with a weapon in my hand.
Right.
So they're excited to just have an opportunity to just shoot their weapon, whether it's a bow or a gun, and missing means very little to them. They're just like, I just want that action. I know it. So reading this,
Oh
I'm like,
yeah.
okay, I get this. Um, so the next stage is the limiting out stage. So the limiting out stage is satisfaction is gained through someone who notches a tag, a big game tag, or limits on duck hunts or quails, or like, okay, shooting a quail is awesome, but it's not that much meat, or a dove is awesome, but ultimately it's not that much meat. Like you want to limit out so you can have a meal. So
Yep.
that's the limiting out stage. And then after the limiting out stage, there's what's called the trophy stage, where satisfaction is gained through somebody who is specifically targeting specific animals. So
Yep.
I've shot mule deer. Now I want to hold out for a mature representation of that animal, you know? And so they'll
Yeah.
start passing, the 3 points, or maybe they want a symmetrical 4x4 with eye guards, and that's only what they're looking for. And so that's the trophy stage. So then it progresses into the method stage where it's like, okay, I've hunted North America. I want to see what other animals there are out there. And so maybe people start traveling to Africa, or they start traveling to Asia or Alaska, or these different frontiers of the hunting journey. And then
Yep.
finally, the satisfaction, the last stage is sportsman stage, where um, hunting mellows for them, and they find more satisfaction in watching somebody else pull the trigger and
Yep.
killing something, and them just being a part of the journey and the story. What I love about that is that it's true. What I
Yep.
don't like about that is the middle one where it says trophy stage,
Mm,
specifically the verbiage of it, because if you hunt by this concept of, well, you better take the first animal that presents itself to you,
mm,
then that stage gets really interrupted or becomes very convoluted.
sure.
Do you have an opinion or perspective on that after hearing those 5 stages? This is an open dialogue. I don't expect you necessarily to have to answer, but what does that make you think about?
Um, man, I would say I agree largely with the different steps. Like, I feel it's weird being that I'm older when I got into hunting, I can see a faster progression of me going through those stages.
Hmm.
I would say from my own personal experience, I'm where I'm starting to be more selective. I want that this next deer season, which is going to be December, January. I want that quintessential 4x4 stud mule deer buck, and I'm going to be a little selective in this next archery season for sure. But it's weird. I mean, if it comes down to January 27th, and I haven't gotten anything. I'm like, well, I do eat. I don't buy any store bought meat really, so I need meat at the end of the day. And there's a little, 3x3 over there. It's probably going to get shot. But yeah, I kind of see a balance in all those. That's what I think I want to do really is have a balance in all of those. Like I can be a trophy hunter if I need to. It is tough to get over that word. In gearing up for this podcast, I was just watching YouTube channels the other day, and Jason Matzinger. Have you watched some of his films?
Yep.
Have you watched the Selective one that he just released?
No, not yet.
Okay, anybody watching this and especially after this conversation, go watch his film Selective. It's on the Wild Sheep Foundation, but he covers the stigmatism around trophy hunting and all that stuff. And man, does he kill it. But not only that, but then he does a great job of selling the idea of the American model of conservation and like how we need to really get behind this big time. But yeah, he does a phenomenal job of just putting it out there of what it is that we're doing, whether it is the first animal that we see, whether it's the animal that gives us the opportunity, or whether it's the animal that's like, this thing's 11 years old, he's lived his life, and that's all that I'm going to do.
Yeah.
You got those different stages of hunters that you just talked about, and it's a very well put film. But yeah, I kind of find myself in a balance of all of those, and my opinion on certain things, like I said, I want to keep an open mind, so it does change from time to time. But yeah, I kind of see an ever evolving. It's like, you ever seen those diagrams where it's like 3 different circles that are overlapping each other?
Yeah, a
And
Venn diagram. Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of like there's a little bit of that going on in all of this. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I am a total believer in an animal presenting itself to you for a
yeah,
shot. And so the idea of holding out for another one or a bigger, more mature one, I can't answer it until I'm in the moment. I am
yeah,
a firm believer and promoter of hunt your own hunt.
yeah.
Hunt your
Same.
own hunt. Be in the moment, you know. Uh, if I've traveled from Texas to Idaho on a spring bear hunt and I see a bear and it's not a big boar, which everyone wants to go shoot. It's like, it's a bear. It's a legal bear. Shoot, man. I don't know if I'm going
Yeah,
to see another one. I'm going to send it.
he's getting
That,
it.
but at the same time, that the duality of that is I love hunting.
Yeah.
I love watching animals. I love nature.
Mhm.
And I don't necessarily want my hunt to end. Right? And so you
Yeah.
have this present what's taken to you or hunt a specific animal and really like get into the patterns of that animal. And these are the struggles that it's okay for people to talk about. Like you don't
Yeah.
have to keep them in. Like learn how to dialogue, the spoken word.
Yep.
Defend your stance, right? If you don't stand for
Mhm.
something, you'll fall for anything, as said by Abraham Lincoln. So, man, Steven, I really
Yeah.
appreciate you coming on this podcast tonight, brother. This has
Thanks
been a
for
lot
having
of
me.
fun, and
Absolutely.
hopefully you find
Sh-
a little inspiration, and you're like,
oh
all right,
yeah.
let's go get it.
Shout out. I just figured out that I could scroll through the comments. I didn't realize that I could see them, but shout out to Zach, who is the PH that said that to me. He just said, "You got it, bro." So he was there with me in Africa, and he said that was a gift, and you should probably take that. So
Love it. And
yeah,
he's over in Africa currently.
he's actually, I think he's here right now. He's flying in relatively soon. So he comes out here and guides for, I don't know, probably about 6 months. I think it kind of varies depending on what he has going on at home. But he
Yeah.
comes here and guides there in Texas at the CK. So
Okay.
yeah, he'll be here for a while.
I love it. One of the questions I like to ask a lot of my guests is,
Yeah.
what has hunting done for you?
Man, it's going to echo a lot of what you've said. It's made me a better, I would hope I'd say a better husband, a better father. And just, it makes me, day 2 or 3, man, I'm missing my family. I miss my wife. I miss my kids. Like so I come home and I appreciate them so much more.
Mhm.
It's really made me, um, learn that just to kind of like humble myself a little bit. Like, you don't know everything that you think you know, or if you think you're confident on something, like that confidence can be shattered real quick. And so it's kind of helped me to spill that into other areas of my life just outside of hunting. Like, hey man, just take a different approach to this. Take the learning aspect, what's the educational value here and stuff like that. Absorb whatever you can.
Yeah.
And then the both aspects of mentorship, being the mentor and the mentee, learning to mentor my kids better, learning to be mentored better. Like, how can I be a better student for those that have something to teach me and stuff? So it's kind of done all those things, encompassed it into one
Yeah.
package.
Drop the ego and live humbly.
Yep.
Man,
Definitely.
I love that. I love that. Well,
Heck
brother,
yeah.
how can people find your content? How can they follow you? Obviously, you put out
Yeah.
some cool stuff.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, just for the podcast, I guess iTunes, Spotify, any of that, YouTube. It's just Bow Hunting AZ, like AZ abbreviated for Arizona. Here on Instagram, Bow Hunting AZ. There's a Facebook group of like 2,000 plus people for Bow Hunting AZ. Just if you need advice or if you come and decide to hunt Arizona or whatever, they try and keep an educational approach, a mentorship approach in there as well. Facebook can get pretty nasty sometimes when somebody asks for some advice or whatever. And I was like, dude, like anybody that takes that sort of spin in there, they get the ban hammer from me right away. So
Yeah.
I want to keep it a promotional place, because you do get guys in there that are like, hey man, I just bought my first bow. So it's like, well, cool, man. Hey, I'm not going to give you my honey hole, but I'll tell you where to start, or at least get you out there and get you going. So any place that you see Bow Hunting AZ, that's us.
I love it. I love it. Brother Steven, thank you so much
Yeah,
for coming on this episode and letting your light shine before
yeah.
humanity. It's such a beautiful thing, brother. I really
Thanks for having me,
appreciate
man.
it. Yeah. Hey, all you listeners out there, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to give a thumbs up, like, share, subscribe, and also go check out the new online store that we launched at soulseekersnation.com. Support the mission
Ooh,
of mentorship as conservation. Pick up yourself a hat, shirt, stickers, whatever. If you
heck yeah.
see anything you like, let us know. Love to help rock that Soul Seekers Nation everywhere as you go out, because remember, we are ambassadors for hunting, whether you like it or not. Once you signed up to become a hunter, it's with you. Be
Yep.
blessed, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in this episode of Soul Seekers Podcast. I'm your host, Johnny Mack, and for my man, Stephen Miller over at AZ or Bow Hunting AZ, be blessed. Freedom on. Remember that mentorship is conservation, and you can never outgive good. Take care, everybody, and stay soulful. If you enjoyed today's podcast and want to support the show, you can always like, share, subscribe, and leave a rating, as it helps us share our mission of mentorship as conservation. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of Soul Seekers Nation as we transform lives through primal adventure. If you want to get more connected with the podcast, check out the Soul Seekers Nation Facebook group, as I look forward to connecting with you on the next episode. So stay tuned and stay soulful.